Hello and welcome. My name is Russell Trafford-Jones and thanks for joining me. This is Broadcast Focus, the show where we look behind the scenes of the broadcast media and entertainment industry by chatting to the people that make it happen. It's a small independent channel, so thanks very much for watching. And if you do want to support me for no money, then just press like on the video. Now, we've been looking at Teletext recently, hearing about its history, also in depth about how it works. Three-parter was with Peter Whitestall, who worked for many years on Ceefax, and you can find links to those conversations in the description below and the cards in this video. It was a fascinating delve, but it left me wanting to know what it's like making Teletext work at the coalface, which is what we're doing today. Now, you might remember I showed you a website in those episodes to explain what Teletext was like when it was used in the UK. So I've turned to the man behind that very website. The site is called nathanmediaservices.co.uk, and the man is called Nathan Dane. Nathan, welcome to the show.
How are you?
Good. I can see you're speaking to us from the heart of your technical surroundings.
Oh, yes. Lots of junk.
Well, we're going to look through the website that we were using. And Peter pointed out was that this isn't just something that simulates Ceefax, so to speak. It is Teletext. It is working for real in real video and being decoded. All of the news, for instance, is up to date. Perhaps we could start there to understand what it is that we're looking at.
It's a recreation of the BBC Ceefax service, and it uses live data feeds to keep the pages up to date. So the page we're looking at the minute, page 101, that's the news index. And as you've pointed out, you can see that all the information there is up to date. So that's being downloaded via the BBC's RSS feeds. That's where I'm getting the news from. What can be a wee bit challenging with that is, first, there's a couple of problems. One, Peter mentioned that back in the day, the editors and journalists had a special skill, shall we say, of keeping the paragraphs nice and short and squeezing the most information into those short amount of lines as possible. Unfortunately, whilst that did stay in place for quite a long time after Ceefax went away, and that made my pages look really great because everything still fit into those nice short paragraphs. Unfortunately, within literally just the past couple of months, it seems like there's been some kind of policy change or something. I don't know. But basically, it's changed. It doesn't just quite fit as nicely anymore. But, yeah, you know, we work with what we've got. So, as I say, we have an RSS feed. That gives us a list of news stories. We can then go through those, download the paragraph information and format that into a teletext page. So I've written custom software. It's been rewritten 2 or 3 times over the past, 7 or 8 years. And it's pretty reliable. What tends to throw it off is whenever there's a big website redesign. So a couple of years ago, the BBC rolled out BBC Wreath, the font, and that was associated with pretty much a full redesign of the website. And that's the sort of thing where I spent, a while. And there's always a transition phase as well. So it's not like you can just go, oh, right, I need to completely rewrite my page code. you have to make it that it works with both, and it has to be intelligent enough to look, is that the old version or the new version, and use the right one.
I see. And things like these racing and stuff like that, is that also from RSS?
Mostly, yes. The actual news stories all come from feeds like that. Scoreboards, they come directly from the score pages. And something that actually helps me is nowadays with things like Google search engine and other search engines, people who run websites are encouraged to put data in such a way that it's easily readable by code so that it can be picked up by search engines and gives you more clicks. And by a funny coincidence, that also really helps me, because if the data is in a sensible format, it makes it very easy to reformat into teletext pages.
And same true for TV and radio, I guess.
TV listings, they come from Freeview. There's a receiver that receives the data and it's converted then into a teletext page. Again, if you look back at the old pages, you'll tend to find that the paragraphs used to be only 2 or 3 lines long, and now they're well, you can see they're not. So it makes it a wee bit harder again to make it fit nicely. But yeah, there's a bit of fiddling around, but I think generally speaking it works pretty well. I mean, the feedback that I get from this is always really, really positive, and people really enjoy it, as do I.
So what prompted you to start? What was the initial motivation?
Well, it sort of started back in 2015, and the way it worked. So I had heard about the Raspberry Pi, but I didn't have one. And there was a competition on in school. I can't remember what exactly it involved. I think it was something to do with coding a game or something like that. And the prize was a Raspberry Pi, and I got this one, and I wanted to. There was a couple of different things that I tried doing with it, and various different projects and whatever. But my passion that I really enjoyed it. I like fiddling with old electronics, and particularly old broadcast technologies and things. And at that stage, I had a system set up in the attic with various old vision mixers and things that allowed me to transmit TV programs and whatever to the TVs around the house. And just completely by accident, I remembered, I remember there used to be this thing on the TV called Ceefax, and it had like news and things on it. I wonder how that worked, and could I do it with a Pi? And I literally, completely, not thinking anything of it, I looked it up on Google, and I came across the Raspberry Teletext project, which is a piece of code written by Alistair Buxton and Peter Kwan. I think it was between them. And essentially what that allows you to do is put page files on a Raspberry Pi, and it transmits them exactly as proper teletext data. It's not an emulation. It's not. Some people think that, you plug it in and you get something that looks like teletext on your TV. It's not. It is literally teletext data. You press text on your remote and your TV decodes it. So that was how that started. And I thought then, how do I make this useful? I wanted to have useful information on it rather than just a bunch of test pages or rubbish or whatever. And I started trying to, write out the odd news story and things. And there's pictures on my website. But the problem with that was it's really, really time consuming to try and update that by hand. You can see, yes, there's the left hand.
That's the Pi you just held up.
Yeah, that's the one that produced the Ceefax service. So you'll see actually there's 2 Pis. So the one on the left produced the Ceefax service and gave me a video feed, and the one on the right produced the website. So that was how anybody outside the house could see it. But at that stage, it was mostly for my own entertainment, really. I wasn't really thinking about other people being interested in this. I was just sort of fiddling about myself. And as a result, the stuff that I tried to code up was more or less things that I was interested in. So I started off, as you can see, with my own teletext service, but I later decided it would be much more sensible to recreate, or maybe not more sensible, that's an interesting choice of words, but more fun to produce a Ceefax service. So that's where the news service and stuff all started off then. So again, Peter Kwan actually wrote the original code that done some of the news, but even by the time I was starting to fiddle with it after he had written it, there were already lots of issues with it. The website had changed, paragraphs were longer, things like that. So it took a bit of fiddling to get it to work for the first time. And from then I just started expanding it. I think the first section I added of my own was the Northern Ireland news on page 160, because obviously being here, that's important to me. And then I had a basic weather page. The weather map didn't come until much later because graphics are very hard to do in code, funny enough. But I had that, and then I had TV listings, and then from, I just kept going and adding sections until basically I got into the stage I am now where, I mean, there's sections that aren't completed even yet after all this time, but it's because either the BBC maybe doesn't do that section anymore or doesn't do quite the same content, so it doesn't really work like it did when it was on Ceefax. There's lots of reasons, but that's the main things that people remember, which are the football scores, the news headlines, the lottery results, the weather. Those are all on there.
So you started with a Pi, but you're clearly not using that Pi anymore because you're holding it in your hand.
Yeah.
So in order to generate that Ceefax, what's changed? What have you been doing? Are you still using a different Pi? Is there some dedicated hardware?
There's a Pi involved, yes. So obviously for the actual teletext, as in that you can look on a TV and with a remote and click through it, you need a Pi to produce an analog signal for that. So I still have ones up in the attic that produce that. One of the problems with the Pi system of doing it is you can't really. So as I mentioned, I ran it through a desk, and that allowed me to put video around the house to different TVs. So if we wanted to watch a film or something, I would play it from the desk upstairs, and you could watch it in the living room, sort of thing. That was how we used to do it. So can't do that with the Pi because you can't pass. Not easily anyway. You can't, or you couldn't, certainly at the time, you couldn't really pass a video signal into it, add the teletext, and then pass that out. So one of my first major electronics projects was recreating a proper inserter. Peter Kwan designed a system that connects to the Pi and does that essentially. Right. And it took me a few goes to get it to work, but that was my first inserter. And from then on, I've redesigned it a few times, and I have various units upstairs that do that for me now. And that's the first board. Those were the first ones that I ever tried making. And one of the problems with it was it's all surface mount components, which are really, really, really tiny. And I was soldering them by hand. Wow. So that should go some way to explain why the first couple of them didn't work.
You had a lot of patience.
Well, yeah. Patience or stupidity or something. Yeah, that's one of the slightly newer inserters. This one. So basically all that's different about that is it's using newer chips. This one has been budged a bit, as you can see from all the glue and budge wires, but we'll brush over that. And we have, this isn't a Raspberry Pi, it's a different sort of mini computer, but it's the same idea essentially. So that is producing the teletext packets. Yeah. They go into a RAM chip on there, and from there they're written out onto the video output, and that's how that works. And this one is designed to go into a card rack, which obviously viewers of this channel familiar with broadcast things will know all about that. Yeah.
Okay. So the big card generates the actual VBI lines. And that small computer created the data that needed to be inserted. Yeah. Cool. The
other thing that's changed was at the start, everything ran literally on that one Pi. So that Pi read the BBC News, it produced the pages, it produced the packets, and it pushed those out as analog video. That's not the case anymore. The actual content generation is done on a server, which is sort of beyond the scope of discussion today. But basically, there's a big server that runs my website, and it runs the Ceefax service, and it runs various other things as well. And it's all done as virtual machines in there. And then the output of that is essentially lots of page files which make up the Ceefax service. And it also means that anybody can log on, they can look on the website, they can browse the live service, or they can download the actual page files onto their own Raspberry Pi to look at on a TV, or whatever they like. Basically, it's all done on there. That's a good picture to show what the teletext data actually looks like. So on a broadcast monitor, you can do pulse cross, which allows you to see the syncs. So the black square down the middle, I mean, I presume most people watching will know this anyway, but I'll explain it nonetheless. The black stripe down the center is the horizontal sync pulse, and it wasn't really used for anything in transmission. You would have seen in links that was used for sound, but we'll not go into all that now. Along the top is the vertical blanking interval, and that's where that white block of noisy looking stuff is, and that is where the teletext data is. And you can also use that for test signals and things like that, but we're most interested in teletext, of course, so that's how it works. And you wouldn't normally see that on a normal TV unless something has gone wrong somewhere.
Yeah, indeed. It's good to see what it really looks like. So you created your own inserter.
Yeah.
And then you're creating your own pages of RSS. And then you've got a YouTube channel.
The live stream is a recreation of pages from Ceefax, which was a program shown overnight, originally on both channels, but towards the end of its life, it was shown overnight on BBC Two to fill in basically from 3 in the morning until 5 o'clock when there were no programs. And what it consists of is a rolling carousel of news, TV listings, and weather, played with some great sax-heavy 90s music. And so what I've done, there are a couple of ways of doing this for a YouTube stream. I could have just screen captured the web viewer. I mean, that would have worked. But the thing is, whenever you're a real nerd into this type of thing, you remember what analog video looks like. And a web viewer doesn't look like analog video. So what I've actually done is made my own Envision decoder. So that is actually decoding the live teletext signal that comes out of a Raspberry Pi. It's making it into an analog composite signal, and that's captured into a capture card that streams online. And that results in lots of dot crawl and noise and other goodness. There has been the odd time someone has said, "Why is the quality of this so terrible?" And that's how it's supposed to look. It's supposed to look slightly soft and noisy because that is how it looked when it was on BBC Two. Yeah. And as I say, there is literally a composite video circuit upstairs. And I mean, there are plenty of pictures floating around online to prove that it is really live whenever I've plugged something out by mistake or something goes wrong, which it does on a regular basis. But anyway, and it comes from, so those 2 boxes, those are ones that I produced for someone over in America. Now, what he wanted to do, he wanted to show basically the same idea, live pages on a monitor. He was from here originally, okay, and which is how he knew about Ceefax, obviously. Over there, they never really had teletext. I mean, they did, but it never really caught on, so it's a very rare phenomenon over in America. So the TV didn't have a decoder built in, so I've built those 2 decoders to feed 2 TVs for him. And if you scroll on down, basically what's inside is a Raspberry Pi, which is producing the teletext feed. The board in the middle is actually decoding the teletext and making it into a composite video feed. And then on the far right is a board that takes the composite video and makes it HDMI, because I think it was a computer monitor or something he was using which needed an HDMI input. And that's going very well. That's live over there all the time. My Envision decoder is similar to that in that mine has the same board inside it that does the actual decoding, and it has an LCD screen on the front for no particular reason, because I wanted it, But it works on the same principle, only obviously mine doesn't have an HDMI output because I go straight to PAL composite video, and that goes into an encoder which converts it to RTMP, which goes to YouTube, which works pretty well, generally.
So when we're looking at this, the viewer itself that we're using, that's by ZX Guesser.
Yes.
How does it get onto the website? What's the ZX Guesser viewer looking at?
So I think the best way to describe it is if you took one of those teletext chips that's on my Envision decoder and cut it in half down the middle. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. So in a normal decoder, you would have hundreds of packets per second coming in off your vertical blanking interval lines. You ask the decoder for a page number and it just filters through those packets until it sees a header for page 100. And then it decodes all the packets that come through until it sees another header that says this is page whatever, and then it knows that's the end of that page, right? Saves those into a RAM and puts them out onto your screen. What Alistair's decoder does, rather than sending hundreds of lines per second over the internet, as I say, it's sort of like we've cut it in half down the middle. So the actual page acquisition bit happens on the server. So whenever you type in a page number, it says to the server, I want page 100, and it acts exactly like a decoder. It waits for the header to come round, it downloads the pages, and whenever it sees that packet, it transmits those packets to the web client and produces your teletext page. So it is literally like exactly the same as a decoder worked. The only difference is it's web-based. And for bandwidth reasons, we don't transmit the entire service while you're not using it. That's why it's so realistic. You would be surprised because one of the chief complaints of people when Ceefax was on the go, or whenever you try and remind people around my age of it, is, it was so slow. You had to wait for the page to come round, and you had this and that and the other. But now, whenever I'm showing people, there has been a couple of people, whenever I've typed in a page number and they've gone, and does it? Oh, look, it does the proper. It waits for the page to come round again and everything. It does it properly. It's not making it up.
Yeah, so if we type in, I don't know, we've got a 150.
Yep,
so
there is a 150.
and we can see the
flash.
It's counting up.
And yeah, so it, as I say,
Nice.
it is literally acting. So you'll see, that's the news flash page. Which, to be fair, the news flash page isn't particularly useful on the web client. It looks much better on my TV here, where there's an actual program going on behind it. I had actually thought about putting the pages from Ceefax stream in the background there, but there are various reasons why that's complicated, so that's not happened yet. So you just get this nice holding caption.
Yeah. One of the reasons I wanted to speak to Peter was I wasn't sure how much the standards captured. Have you had difficulty or challenges in getting the information you need or cajoling it to work? We keep on referring to it as an old technology because for us, we stopped using it already. But it's still going in Poland and other countries. So there should be not only current equipment, but theoretically there shouldn't be kind of a big black hole of info. So what's your experience been like over the years?
I have to say, for normal level 1, which is your standard normal teletext, not really. There are the specs and stuff that are online from the likes of the EBU and various other places that do standards is very, very much full and complete. Where it gets complicated is the higher level stuff. So towards, I think it was sort of early 90s, late 80s maybe, there were experiments with higher level teletext and what that gave you more colors, special characters, a few, slightly better graphics, things like that. That, because it's not unlike PAL in that they tried to shoehorn more features into an existing signal without screwing up everyone else, essentially. And as a result, it's hideously complicated. I don't really worry about it very much because by the time of the era of Ceefax that I'm recreating didn't really have any higher level stuff, so I don't worry about it too much. But I have experimented with it and I have managed to get some parts of it to work. But there's not really a lot of point because not very many TVs supported it anyway. The other thing that was quite fun, and I'm sort of in progress doing a video of my own about this now. I say that, I mean, I've put it to you. I'll just tell you the story. So a lot of people don't realize that digital television actually still has the support for teletext within it, as in proper teletext, not red button style teletext, as is used over in, as you say, some European countries. And between me and Alistair Cree, managed to figure out how that works and get it going on a TV here. That was quite complicated. Digital TV is way harder than analog TV is. And I want to do a video explaining how it all works. But put it to you this way: I first started working on it this time last year, and it's still not done. So I think that tells you all you need to know about my time scale on projects. But I do think it is interesting because, as I say, people have this sort of idea that, because the digital switchover killed off Ceefax, there's a sort of a notion in the back of your mind that, you mustn't be able to do teletext over digital, or it was too modern or whatever. It's not actually the case. There are lots of standards in place for teletext, for various other things that work over digital TV. And I was really surprised that I have yet to find a TV that I've tested it on that hasn't worked. So it just shows you if we really, really wanted to do teletext again, we could.
Still possible.
Yeah. And,
so how do you find on the website? I presume over the years you've had contact with people who use the interactive viewer. Do people come habitually, or are they there just reminiscing?
It's hard to know because there's certainly lots of people who say they use it every day. Yes, I have no reason to doubt them, but I'm just going to put it out there that I don't actually monitor all the logs to the site. I don't sit and look at people's IP addresses and things. So I have a view counter that sort of counts hits to the page that I can look up, and I'll usually only look that up whenever something has happened in the news to do with Ceefax, because you'll usually see a big spike. But yes, there's a couple of interesting ones that I can think of. One, I've had contact with some people and they use it with older relatives, use it to check scores and things. That works quite well. They really like that. But at the other end of the scale, I also had an email from a fella, and he said, I have it set up on a Pi in the TV in the living room, and my, 4 or 5 year old son uses it because he's way too young to be on the internet, and Ceefax offers a nice, it shows what you need. He was looking at football scores or something like that again, and it allows really good access to that, but also there's no way that there's going to be inappropriate adverts or whatever popping up down the side. So it actually, it's something I had never even thought of as a possibility. But he was using it for there's someone else who is growing up with Ceefax just in a different way than I did, which is crazy.
What about the pages from Ceefax on YouTube? Is that kind of a constant bubbling of people who have it on in the background, or?
Yeah, and it's hard to know exactly what everyone's using that for, but certainly it's been going for, well, I used to do a stream sort of at weekends, and that was about the height of it. I only recently started doing it permanently 24 hours a day, and the viewers have picked up. Like, it used to be that sort of late at night and stuff like that, you would have just had 0 on the view count, which is slightly discouraging, but that pretty much never happens now. There are always like a minimum of 3 or 4 people watching it. And I mean, it has peaked, a bit more. It's probably, I think the most I ever had watching at one point was like 20 something ish. Somewhere around there. So, I mean, it's not huge numbers, but the fact is, if you look not at the concurrent viewers, but the unique total, it's quite high. There's several thousand, I think, on it now. So you know that there are people continuously sort of dropping in and out. And the thing that really gets me is whenever I have a power cut or something here and Ceefax goes off, and you get people commenting, "Oh, there's no Ceefax today," and when will it be back? And whenever I put up the listing that says, the live stream will begin again at such and such a time, you get, I think the last time I did it, there was like 15. It came up 15 are waiting. So
Right.
people do pay attention to it, yeah, which is quite something when you think that it's originating from a mess of wires in my attic.
I think it's a good idea to do the live stream effectively. It was obviously it's kind of what we do, making TV. You're doing a live video. There's no limit on the length of live streams in YouTube.
Not anymore. No, I think
Right.
there used to be, but there's not now.
So you can just leave it going indefinitely.
Yeah, the only reason it ever stops is, as I say, whenever I break something. Until very recently, I didn't have any backup. So if there was a power cut here that lasted more than 20 minutes, which is when the UPS runs out of battery, that was it.
There is no Ceefax.
I'm sort of working on a backup, but it's not quite there yet. And we're getting there.
You mentioned Alistair, who wrote the viewer, Peter, who's helped you with design and all sorts, I guess. Is there much more of a community around Teletext of any
There
sort?
is, yes. There's quite a. We have a Discord group and we have a Facebook group. The Discord group, I would say, is probably the main one at the moment. And basically, so you have a few sort of main groups of people. You have the likes of me, who is really into the technology side of things more so than recovery and artist stuff.
Yeah.
So there's quite a group of people, and what they do is they recover teletext from old VHS recordings, which is quite important for me, because that is where I get, the inspiration for what the pages used to look like and that sort of thing. So that's and they're preserving history essentially, because obviously in those days broadcasters didn't save pages, so it went out on the air and that was it, gone. And it's certainly a big challenge capturing teletext packets from videotape, because I mean, as we all know, videotape quality is terrible. And teletext was already sort of right at the edge of what resolution could reliably go over analog TV. So once you start putting that, squishing it into a tape, but Alistair Buxton has written code that does magic. That's the only way I can describe it. It does magic things.
So this is showing how this is supposed to be the headers.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of messed up at the top, aren't they?
If you imagine that the first blot there on the vertical blanking interval is the clock run-in, which is 10, 10, 10, and so on. And when you look at it on a VHS tape, it's just a blur. There's nothing there. So I think what his code is able to do is it's able to compare brightness levels and sort of hazard a guess is the best way I can describe it. If it's pure white, it knows, well, there must be 2 or 3 ones there that are making it look white. If it's slightly grayer, it's mix of zeros and ones. I don't understand it. I will fully admit that. I am not a programmer, and I'm certainly not into, computer learning and machine learning and stuff like that. But it's something along those lines. It's just magic. It's crazy. I tend to stay very much towards the technology side of it for 2 reasons. One, I can't draw, and and two, I don't really have any tapes from the time that would yield anything particularly interesting, if that makes sense. So it would make more sense for the 5 or 6 tapes that I have lying around. It makes more sense for me to send them to someone else who knows what they're doing than to try and rip it off myself, and have to buy capture cards and whatever to make it work. So I stick mostly with the technology and the recreation type side of things.
Some incredible art.
Yeah,
here.
some of the folks who do this are, it's amazing what can be made up with a couple of blocks, essentially.
These, I
There's
assume, are original ones, and then obviously there's a
yeah,
whole load of people who are now
that
creating
was
new.
the last page that was transmitted on Ceefax before it was switched off here in Northern Ireland. I got to stay up late to watch that. That was in 2012 when I was 11. Anyway, we'll gloss over that.
So that's been really useful, and thanks for talking through it. It's really good to have something which is the actual technology and not just simulating it. So I just want to say thank you to Fiona and Becky from Page Media PR for helping out, making sure that Broadcast Focus keeps going. As we said at the beginning of the show, please pop a like on the video, and thank Nathan for his time. It's been really good, and thank you, Nathan. Hopefully we can speak again.
Hopefully, yeah. Thank you.